The federal Liberals have tabled Bill C-21 with new legislation to amend our current gun laws. Gun control advocates say it doesn't go far enough and that the Prime Minister did not keep his promises. Now, on the other hand, gun owners say it unfairly targets them, including farmers, hunters, and sport shooters. Today's guest is Rick Blakeley, president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association and the Lethbridge Shooting Sport Facility. Rick, welcome to Bridge City News.
How do you do? Good to meet you.
Now, first of all, tell me a bit about the Lethbridge Shooting Sport Facility. What kind of people are part of the club and what age ranges? Is it for everyone?
Well, actually it is. We've got a very diverse membership. Over 2,000 women and men and children, of which the adults are members. The children, we provide the facility for free for children who are accompanied by their parents or a guardian. So it's a really diverse group. We don't refuse membership to anyone, and we have way too much fun.
Now, Rick, one concern I keep hearing is that very little of the new gun legislation focuses on criminal misuse of firearms. Instead, it really singles out the legal gun owners who've been vetted by the RCMP, including sport shooters, hunters, farmers, and ranchers. What are your thoughts?
Well, you're absolutely right. And earlier you said the people who are wanting controls over guns feel that they're disappointed in Liberal government. Many of our members voted Liberal because they said that they would put in regulations that respected hunters, firearm owners, and farmers. So we feel that they've definitely went against our what we thought they were all about. This new law doesn't really change much. The current laws are very strict. As a matter of fact, we talk about hockey or football or something like that. If a person who owns a firearm is engaged in a hockey game and gets a little hot under the collar and fights, they can have their firearm license taken away because they have shown violent behavior. It's no different than their new red and yellow and I forget what colors they are, but the flags, they're using the terminology used in the United States, and it's already in place in Canada. Right now, I can get my firearms and my ability to own firearms taken away.
Now, Rick, as a gun owner yourself, are you tired of being the target of this kind of legislation? Pardon the pun, by the way. And how much of this new gun legislation is actually new?
Well, like I said, it really is a reiteration of a lot of the things that are currently in the law. The only addition is there's a whole bunch of firearms that are on the new prohibited list, firearms that were purchased and registered and looked after in safes, in vaults, and taken to the range for shooting sports activities. So those guns represent about 900,000 guns that the government's currently talking about confiscating through a buyback program, which is basically a program of telling you what they'll pay you for a gun and you got to take it. So I think that's illegal right now.
If most of the gun crime is coming from gangs in the big cities, will this kind of legislation actually fix anything? Or is it maybe better to focus on stopping the illegal guns from crossing the border?
Absolutely. Illegal guns, it's really interesting how perceptions are. Most of the illegal guns come from across the border or are actually built by the criminals. And so these guns that we have are stored in vaults. They don't, very seldom are they ever involved in a crime. So violent people use firearms for violent intent. Of the murders since 1980, 116 murders were committed by violent people who had registered firearms, 116 people since 1980. That's over 40 years.
So, Rick, why were certain rifles banned? Rifles like the AR-15 are labeled as assault weapons, which are only meant to be used on the battlefield by the military. But is that actually the case, or are they genuinely a sport shooting or hunting rifle?
They they were designed by the shooting sports people who shot in sports where you had to be very nimble and very accurate. And so they designed a firearm that was ergonomically fitting them, and it was light and it was nimble and it was easy to use. The military took that design, uh, didn't use the semi-automatic, which is a pull of the trigger, shoots a bullet. They made it into a fully automatic machine gun that looked and felt exactly like the sporting gun, because they needed a rifle that would be nimble in Vietnam, where it was jungle warfare.
Rick, the new legislation allows cities to ban handguns by means of restricting their storage and their transportation. Do you see this as really a good idea, or is there maybe potential concerns here?
It's good that you mentioned that, because firearms currently that we own and are in our vaults and safes um, are in a very safe position. It's illegal for us to store a firearm um, unlocked or out in the open. So they're all in vaults and safes anyway. Central storage won't change that. The guns that aren't stored properly are the guns in the belt of the violent person who is using a firearm for violent intent. They haven't followed the rules, and the government will never, ever, until they start prosecuting them, get them to comply with the rules. We're the scapegoats. Um, the criminals, it's really interesting. The current government has made the minimum sentences for firearm use of a firearm in the commission of a crime. They've taken the minimum sentences out of those offenses and drug offenses. It really makes me wonder who is the priority here. It seems like they are looking after the criminal and definitely impacting the safety of every citizen.
Now, Rick, another issue is that municipalities are normally under provincial jurisdiction. So, do the feds actually have the constitutional right to do this? I understand that the province might actually challenge this.
Well, you're absolutely right. The federal government is, in this case, stepping all over municipalities and provinces, and it is, from my understanding, provincial regulation to it's provincial regulations, and they didn't even consult with the provinces. So this is going to be another issue of poorly thought out firearm policies.
Now, the legislation has a voluntary buyback program for the banned guns, but gun owners don't have to sell their guns to the government as long as they don't shoot them or sell them and they keep them locked up. Now, this obviously has infuriated a lot of gun control advocates, and this does raise some interesting questions. If these weapons really are dangerous, why would you not follow through and make it mandatory with a buyback program?
Well, first I have to correct you in your term weapons. That's the propaganda from the government. They're calling them weapons, which are typically used for killing people. Our firearms are used for shooting targets, and there's a very clear distinction between the intent of the person using both of those tools. The I don't see it as being a legitimate activity. If you were to tell me that I had to sell you my car for $100, I'm sure there would be a case for a charge. It's illegal for you to tell me what you're going to pay me for an object, and so the government is really going outside of personal property rights. What's next? Do they take all the gasoline cars and say, we're going to have a buyback program? They never owned the car, but they'll give you $1,000 for it.
and then we'll go back to horse and buggy. There you go.
Yeah, right.
It may not work in the wintertime quite as well, though. Now, Rick, are you hearing any feedback from local area gun store owners on this? Because if they already have some of these banned guns as part of their inventory, it would only seem fair that the government buy all of them back.
Well, it's really interesting. That's a really interesting part. The government's telling business owners to send them back. Interesting fact that this new bill, Bill 21, did add airsoft guns, BB guns, and paintball guns to the number of guns that are even toy guns to the prohibited firearms in the act, which is pretty ludicrous. And there's a number of companies that, I mean, there's thousands of jobs on the line as far as firearm stores. But in the past, they have shifted to hunting, to other firearms that are not prohibited. It's going to cost millions. And Bill, let's just be real frank. It's going to be $1 billion problem, maybe even more.
Wow. Now, another concern is that Bill C-21's red flag and yellow flag legislation would apparently allow police to enter the home of a gun owner without a warrant after receiving a complaint. Can you explain how that works?
Well, there's another case where firearm owners are treated differently than criminals. Currently, it's illegal for me not to update my address and location. A while ago, the Conservative Party tried to put through a bill that would maintain the addresses of people who had been charged with violent crimes. That bill failed. The Liberals and the NDP didn't want that in. So right now, under the current legislation, they can enter my home. They can search it, check to make sure that my firearms are properly stored in a vault. They can talk to anyone they want as far as my mental capacity, and anyone can report me for as a firearm owner, a licensed firearm owner, a respectful, responsible firearm owner. They can report me if I do any violent act, even if I'm engaged in a hockey game or a football game or a soccer game. If I get upset and start hitting somebody, that's a violent act, and I can lose my guns and my privilege to own firearms.
So, Rick, any final
Right
thoughts
now.
as to where this is going and how concerned Canadians and law-abiding gun owners should respond?
I don't know where they're going with this. I would expect that they're wanting to eliminate all firearms. They definitely are trying to follow the example of New Zealand. New Zealand's a small island. It's very isolated. It doesn't have a United States on its border. And so it's very easy for them to control firearms. However, I understand that illegal firearms is still a problem in New Zealand. So where is this going? I think there's a utopian belief that if there are no firearms, there will be no wars and there will be no violence. But really, firearms are, it's a wonderful sport. It's an Olympic sport. And I have taught children how to use firearms, and children, we offer programs for children who can't afford any other of the sports because we offer them for free. And I have had children who have problems for their parents. And once they start using firearms and start enjoying the sports, they understood what responsibility was. They understood that they were being responsible for a potential danger to others, and they have different opinions about violent video games now. So I think it's wonderful that the government of the past used to encourage children to take up the shooting sports. I think that was a very good activity to teach responsibility and respect for others.
Well, I
And we
remember,
try and
you know,
maintain
my
that.
father had an acreage out by Bowden, Alberta, and I was a kid back in the 70s. And
Yep.
I started out on a pellet gun to a 22, and then he handed me a 12-gauge shotgun, showed me how to put the stock into my shoulder, says, "Go ahead, son, let it go." So I did some target shooting, and I landed 12 feet behind me on my butt right after that. So I'll never forget that
Same
when I was a kid.
experience, only my dad lined me up with a slough.
Thank you so
The,
much for your time today, Rick. Rick Blakeley is the
yeah,
president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association. Thanks again.
thank you very much.